Hi, I'm Justin Paperny with White Collar Advice, and today I'm going to talk about the criminal justice system's objectivity versus subjectivity. So, when we talk about subjectivity, we're really dealing with personal feelings, personal tastes, and opinions. Objectivity is really quite simple. Did you get into the drug program or did you not get into the drug program? Did you get the prison of your choosing or did you not get the prison of your choosing? It's very clearly defined, it's black and white. I'm going to focus more on the subjectivity of it because, well, if you're dealing with lawyers and consultants, you may get a variety of opinions, and that's because it's subjective. So your job as a defendant or a lawyer, if you're looking for a consultant for a client or a family member, is to use as much data as you possibly can to make informed decisions, knowing that at the end of the day, it's going to come down to your judgment. Okay? And so let's transition into a phone call I had earlier today that was frustrating. I spoke with the defendant and I proposed a number of things that I thought he should do in advance of his sentencing. And I told him before offering these suggestions that there's no guarantee that any of it works, right? He's only going to get sentenced one time. So it's not as if we have an alternative or what would happen if he didn't do any of it. In other words, I don't know exactly what would happen if he chose not to do volunteer work, or if he chose not to write a narrative, or if he chose not to speak openly and publicly about his crime, as many of my clients do with me. So every suggestion that I eventually made, he sort of defaulted to, well, how do I know if that will work? How do I know if that will work? Well, it's subjective. There's no guarantee that it will work. Is there a chance the day of your sentencing, the judge shows up and gives you the worst possible outcome despite your efforts? Maybe. That he could care less about your narrative, your volunteer work, your letters, I suppose, but we'll never really know. I doubt a judge is going to tell you that. My clients, the people that follow my work or work with me, embrace the idea that while standing at sentencing, before sentence, they want to be able to say to themselves, there's nothing more I could have done to prepare for this moment. Indeed, the way that you get the best outcome is by preparing for the absolute worst outcome. It's like life insurance. I have life insurance on my wife and little girl. I hope to never use it. Believe me, I don't. But God forbid if something happens, it's there. I want to prepare for the worst case outcome. That's how you get the best outcome. I think all of you should do that, whether you work with me or somebody else. But you have to embrace the subjectiveness, how subjective this process actually is. So let's transition into some specifics. I lecture at USC, 15 to 20 times a year. I'm very grateful that my second book, Ethics in Motion, they actually make required reading for a number of business classes. So next month, on the 22nd of September, I'll return to USC to lecture at the business school. Then that following Monday, I'll speak with a number of individual classes. On the 22nd, I share my story, the Lessons from Prison story. Then the following Monday to classes, I share stories from my second book, Ethics in Motion. So recently, I suggested to some clients in Los Angeles who have already pled guilty, their cases open in the public. I said, you should come with me and speak at USC. You should come at the end of my class. I'll ask you some questions, share your cautionary tale, educate others on the consequences that follow bad decisions, educate others on how you did not have criminal intent, though working out of gray areas, not fully understanding your tendencies, succumbing to pressures, not adequately managing temptations, have put you in a position where you're separated from your wife, your kids, and children. That is a valuable message to share with business students. Now, I've had this conversation a lot of times over the years with defendants, and it's oftentimes the first thing they say is, will it lead to a shorter sentence? And I get it. It's okay to be opportunistic. I understand if you're going to get back and speak about the greatest failure of your lifetime. Essentially, that's what you're doing as a public speaker. It's like getting an F in class, and then your teacher says to you, hello, Justin, I'd like you to tell the whole world about the biggest F you've ever made in your whole life. It's humbling, it's embarrassing, it's a tough talk. So I can understand if you're going to endure it, you may want to get something on the other end. I make quite clear, there may be nothing that comes from it. You may speak, get good feedback, bad feedback. Perhaps it's cathartic. Perhaps it feels good to speak openly about your decisions, to own it as you prepare for the next phase of your life. Sometimes it can help. Sometimes judges will appreciate and make comment over public speaking, and I'm going to transition to that in a moment. So as I propose it to certain clients, I encourage them to run the idea by their lawyer. And now when we talk about how subjective this process is, in a matter of 1 hour, a couple of weeks ago, I had one lawyer say, I think it's a terrible idea for you to go to USC with Justin and speak. I think you should lay low in advance of your sentencing. Get yourself off the radar. That was one lawyer's opinion. I don't know, about 35 minutes later, another lawyer said, I think it's a great idea for you to go to speak, for you to speak. It'll make you feel good. It'll help others. I know the pain that you're in, and perhaps it'll save someone else from going down this road. And yeah, maybe we get a letter from the professor, and maybe I mention it in your sentencing memorandum, but maybe not. I think it would be very good for you. So just like that, one lawyer says yes, another lawyer says no. Both cases are equally as public. Both cases are actually very similar in the healthcare space. I told the client, you have to make your own decision. You have to exercise your own judgment. I think there's value for you in telling the story and speaking openly. I think it begins to prepare you for the next phase of your life, because I believe how well you tell your story in many ways will influence how well you overcome part of this process. So that's one example. Another example is volunteering. Certainly, I've helped line up volunteer work for clients. Sometimes when it comes up, they'll say, is that going to help me at sentencing? I get it. I've been there. It may help. You may get a great kick-ass letter from the nonprofit organization attesting to your hard work. And certainly it could help. A letter that I turned in at my sentencing was from a nonprofit organization, the Black Business Association. It really helped me. They authenticated what we did. It was verified. Certainly over the years, some defendants have said, hey, will you write a letter for me if I hire you? And I say, there's no quid pro quo. You have to do the work. We have to measure it. If you do the work and we measure it and you're providing value, yeah, the organization, wherever you volunteer, should write a letter for you. Again, earlier today on this phone call, the defendant said, well, how do I know volunteer work is going to help me? I can't say for sure. It would be misleading for me to say for sure it's going to help you, because the judge, it may not influence the judge. But what's the downside in giving back and volunteering your time, of speaking openly about your conduct? And it can go over so many issues besides volunteering and speaking. Generating character reference letters. You know, there's a lot of talk about letters and how many to collect. That's a strategy, depending on the judge. I think your lawyer should know if the judge is more likely to read 5 letters versus 50. But again, earlier today, this defendant said, why am I going to get letters? I don't know for sure the judge is going to read it. So it was a very cynical view of every suggestion that I had. The rebuttal was, I don't know if it's going to work. And look, I'm really couldn't help him. And I've been criticized in the past for acknowledging that I might not be able to help, that I may not be able to help everyone, but I'd rather be brutally honest and confront inconvenient truths and hard truths as someone's going down this path. It's difficult enough as it is. So I'm of the opinion that before you stand in front of the judge, you want to be able to tell yourself and your family, there's nothing more I could have done, even if I don't know exactly how much it's going to help me. A lot of people talk about personal narratives. Okay, certainly you should see narratives that they've written, get an example, ask, hey, has a judge ever commented on a narrative that you've written? Has it ever, been discussed? Certainly that's something that you should want to consider. How well do they write? How well do they articulate an argument? What's the background, the introspection, the thought? So those are important things to consider. But again, there's no absolute guarantee that a judge is going to say, because of your narrative, I was going to give you 3 years, now I'm going to give you probation. And if we're going to be negative or cynical, your judgment should tell you not to take action, because you don't believe there's anything that you can do to impact your outcome. So let me wrap up this, I guess is what a little bit of a shorter video for me. I'm of the opinion that defendants succeed when they mitigate, when they learn to advocate for themselves. I have clients that have given lawyers $1 million. I have many clients that have worked with public defenders. Irrespective of whether you have a public defender or you've retained a lawyer, the onus is on you to articulate through your own efforts, your own words, your own actions, why you're worthy of the best outcome. If I can help you, if my team and I can help you do that, that's awesome. If you think you're there, you can get there on your own, great. Watch my videos, read my free books. Regardless, you've got to prepare and take matters into your own hand, because the government currently owns the narrative of your life. The government owns the narrative. God, I just said that twice. Yeah, I wasn't sure what to say, so I said it twice. Work with me here. They own the narrative. So you can embrace it and let them continue to control the narrative, or you can work to shake it. You can work to begin to create a new record that demonstrates you're better than some bad decisions you made. Now, let me reiterate, I know for many of you it's tough to accept that responsibility. People have said to me, is it hard to read your Department of Justice press releases that castigate you as a criminal? No, it's not, because it's true. I did it. I willfully crossed the line. I created victims. I embarrassed my family. I ruined my career. I deserve to be held accountable, and I deserve to go to prison. So for me, the process was much easier because I did it. I couldn't manage temptation. I succumbed to an aggressive corporate culture. I knew right from wrong, yet it did not stop me. So imprisonment for me was much easier because I did it. I know many of you watching this should not be going to prison. I know many of you watching this pled guilty only because the odds of prevailing at trial were too low. I know many of you watching this engaged out of gray areas, and at worst you thought it would be a civil sanction and not criminal. Therefore, accepting responsibility is tough. And if you do take a plea agreement, it can be tough for you to speak openly and honestly because you actually feel like you're lying. That's the irony of the criminal justice system. So many defendants feel as if they took a plea agreement that is pure fiction, but they felt as if they had to, so they end up saying they're sorry when they don't think they did anything wrong. I understand it. What I'm conveying to you is you're here watching me to learn, I think, a number of things, including how do you get the best sanction in the most favorable institution. And if you pled guilty, whether you had criminal intent or not, if you pled guilty, whether you intended to create victims or not, the onus is on you to articulate to every stakeholder that you can become better. And I propose that speaking openly, volunteering, generating a letter that is not boilerplate garbage, that is unique to your background, your life, your circumstances, will help you. They will help you. And I'm going to close with two thoughts on the public speaking. So there was a female in Chicago last year who was looking at 5 or 6 years in federal prison. I'll put up a link to it. And I'll actually read it right here. And the judge commented on her efforts to give back. For example, it said U.S. District Judge Thomas Durkin told Hisselbeck, who admitted to falsifying medical records, that her sentence would be closer to Gilman's had she not worked to educate others about healthcare fraud since her indictment. The judge said, not every defendant does what she does. So here we have a judge that commented on her efforts to educate others on healthcare fraud. That's a data point. That's something to learn from. I hope that my clients who speak with me at USC next month get a similar outcome from their judge, and the judge appreciates their efforts to give back. But there's no guarantee, because you can counter that with Garrett Bauer, who I spoke with before he went to prison, who's serving 9 years for a very large insider trading case. Garrett spoke, I think, to 147 classes before he surrendered to prison. He still got 9 years in prison. It didn't sway the judge. Again, it's very subjective. It's based on personal opinions and tastes. They have different feelings about defendants. My suggestion is you do it all. The volunteering, the speaking, the narrative, the letters, the building of a new business, both before you go in and while you're in prison. Lastly, I know I ramble. I spoke to a defendant a couple of days ago that said, I may be cooperating in a case. It may go on for a year. It's already gone on for a year. I've done nothing over the last year. And he said, what do you think? I said, well, dude, you might as well already be in prison. Your life's on hold. You're not doing anything productive. You're just waiting. You might as well already be in jail getting credit. He's like, yeah, that's kind of how I feel. And I said, what would you like to do? He's like, I have a great business idea. I said, let's begin to build it. The reason my company's white collar advice is because so much of the work I do is before prison and the hardest part after prison, coming home. Frankly, the federal prison part of it, the planning is the easiest part, despite what others may tell you, because some want to scare you to get your business. Nothing to be scared about. There's as much violence in a camp as there is in a 7-Eleven, right? So if you're going to watch this, use the time productively. Use the time to educate others, to work openly with your lawyer, and to do things that, frankly, people think are crazy. The next video I'm filming is called My Last Day in Federal Prison, and I'm going to talk about, upon my release, visiting my website for the first time and viewing the many favorable and unfavorable comments from people and how that impacted me and what I learned from that experience. So I'll touch on that in my next video. Until then, I encourage you to read, to embrace the process. You should read both of my books. They're free. Ethics in Motion is free. Lessons from Prison is free. You should opt in. You should get the book. I'm not going to aggressively market and sell you. That is not my style. Anyone who has reached out to me or spoken with me knows my goal is to educate, to give advice, and to ensure, frankly, that you manage this whole damn process better than I did. Because I was in total denial and in la-la land for 3.5 years with my head buried in the sand, and I embarrassed my family and made matters measurably worse because of my stupidity and ignorance. And I'd do it all differently if I could. And that's the reason that I'm doing this video. Embrace what's subjective. Don't convince yourself that your efforts won't matter. And do all you can to advocate why you're worthy of the best outcome. I set a goal of wrapping up this video 6 minutes ago, but did you notice I'm still talking? Sometimes I can't stop talking. It's a benefit to keep talking when you have to do an 8-hour fraud conference in Arkansas, but it's not a benefit when your marketing team tells you to do 5 to 7 minute videos and I keep talking. It's not intentional. It's what I do. At least I'm aware of it. I wish you all well. Subscribe, like, comment, And I hope to connect with you all soon. Thanks so much for your time. Work hard. Bye bye.